So good morning. It's a slightly cooler morning this morning, which is nice, nice and fresh. As we kind of get out, get the day started, doing a bit of physical and spiritual as well as emotional exercise. I'll turn the camera around because I know, to be honest, my dogs are more photogenic than I am. So there's Luna, and down here is little Banjo. Anyway, what are we going to talk about this morning? Well, it was interesting. Yesterday, a friend of mine he's a local councillor, in the borough next to where I live. So sadly, I can't vote for him. But anyway, he's an independent, and he was actually asked to stand by the local residents association because he was someone who always put so much time and effort free into the community. And against all the odds, he's now been elected several times in a row. So well done to you, Wisdom. Anyway, anyway, he asked me if I'd like to. He has he does a blog page. Asked if I'd like to write an article on it, on the subject of trust. So, seeing as I started to think about that, I thought let's just share a few thoughts. Because obviously, we're writing an article for the whole community. But one of the things I found as time has gone on is that there's a huge amount of understanding that probably is implicit in huge numbers of churches, which has real value, not because we're Christians, but because we're human. And therefore it's applicable to everybody. And that's kind of become the foundation of some of the coaching work and training work that I do. And in that mix, one of the things that was the focus of the article I'm going to be doing is on how we build trust from a psychological point of view. So before we think about that, I just wanted to kind of put trust into kind of the context of trust is very closely related to faith. They're both one's a kind of sub-quality of the other. Let's turn this around. Faith is not the same as belief. You believe in a fact, 2 + 2 = 4. So that's belief. Trust is something that emerges from a relationship. It's a quality of the relationship. Until there is a relationship, there's no possibility of faith. And within that, faith, faith in my parents to look after me, emerges because I already have a relationship with my parents. So we are saved by faith. We're saved by grace, but through faith. Is the thing, the statement, and faith in one sense it's something that emerges because God has taken the initiative, which is part of why if you go on in Ephesians it talks about it being a gift. So that's one aspect of gift, but I'm going to touch on some other bits because I want to kind of look at how when we're building trust we recognise there is always a dynamic because this faith is something that is emergent within the context of a relationship. It becomes a quality of the relationship that you can't have it without the relationship. Unless you have the connection, there is no such thing as faith, there's just belief. So you can believe in God with no relationship, but you can't have faith in God without the relationship. And He's taken the initiative, He initiates, we cooperate. And as I was saying, there's also that place where, so we're going to see, faith can either be a demand within the relationship or it can be a gift within the relationship. And that little kind of key helps us understand how it is we can actually go and be proactive in a secular sense at building trust within the world, building faith within the world, faith within the relationship. And part of the quality of faith is the place of trust, you see. So trustworthiness, faithfulness, they all become kind of part of the blend. So I don't want to say at this point. Yeah, I'll finish the theological bit and then we'll do the psychological bit. So I just think about that little thing. So faith is either a demand or it's a gift. So if I have a relationship with you, when we've met, I can say you must have faith in me. So I'm making a demand on you, and we have no context. We have a very shallow context. And if I make that demand on you, I'm saying you have to do all the work in this. You have to put all the effort in. And if we have a relationship, though, where I've always been faithful myself, then my request to you to have faith in me is actually much more it's more soliciting the gift back, if you like. I've given you the ability to have faith in me easily. So a child has easy faith in its parents most of the time. It doesn't kind of think to itself, this is a big effort, I've got to really do this. It's a gift because the quality of the relationship and the experience of the relationship means that faith in that context is not a demand, it's a gift, as I said. Anyway, come back to this thing because sounds like I'm jumping from place to place, and probably am. It's just one thought led to another. Because trust is within that, and I often use, when I'm in the secular context, we use the word trust. But I mean a very kind of similar sort of thing. And the reality when it comes to the world of kind of the human psyche is there is no such thing as the magic bullet when it comes to kind of things like a quality like trust. There's no gene that makes you trust one person rather than another. There's no event in your childhood that makes one person trust another person. There's no hormone in the system. And so that's true of almost everything. There's never a gene that made you do it. There's never an event that fully made you do it. But a lot of these things do have an impact. And that's one of the things that, if you like, the universal, which we kind of show regularly, is that none of these things is the 100% story. About the most certain thing you can say is that a compounding of childhood trauma will have a very detrimental effect on the well-being of the child. That's probably the most certain fact within with all the scientific literature on psychology. I'm laughing because it's very tragic. So actually, the human spirit can manage one trauma, and then with a bit of a space, maybe another. But it's when they all kind of come together that those become really insurmountable. And we have to have great amounts of care and support around those who've gone through those things. So I'm kind of caveating it all, because I'm about to kind of tell you a hormonal story to say that, but the hormones aren't the whole story. Hormones are weird. So, I say weird. No, it's not. The best way of understanding the hormonal response in the human body is it tends to amplify things that are there, certain qualities that are there anyway. So we often, in a naive way, we think of testosterone is all about aggression. It's not. It's just that in certain people with certain other contexts and certain other things, one of the things that testosterone will do is it will amplify their aggression. But for those who haven't had those other experiences, it will sometimes do the total opposite. That's the weird thing. Testosterone also amplifies the ability to love passionately. On the flip side, oxytocin, which is kind of a more female, in our mind, hormone, which is key to kind of relationships, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. I'm just kind of caveating it all. Oxytocin is actually, in many ways, I would say this as a kind of a general rule when you're working in kind of coaching areas. Oxytocin, in one sense, is the foundation of pro-social behaviour. But in the wrong context, it can actually produce quite spiteful behaviour because actually it's not so much that it's causing you, forcing you to do something. It actually multiplies and amplifies tendencies that come in from other places. And so the human psyche is such a complex mix. It's impossible to be 100% with any one individual. Just understand the general flows. Because just as though there are those who really emphasise, it's not that simple, they are 100% true. But in the broad scheme of things, from a statistical point of view, sometimes it is that simple. You put 1,000 people together, you can say 500 of them will experience this, and so there's a statistical tendency. So, what the thrust of the article I'm doing, I'm just going to say hello to this dog that's coming up in there, Walker. Morning. Oi! Fritz! Banjo, listen. Luna. Come on. Come on. Sorry, not sure what happened there with my... I was going to say yes. This is Luna's bad behaviour. Let's have a look at Dog of Shame. He got into a little ruck there with it's all excitement when we're doing these things. So anyway, let's keep talking. I was just saying, yes. So when it comes to the issue, because you see, trust is a massive issue in the world today. Nobody really trusts anybody else, and I get that. I watch the BBC News. I don't trust. Just being really blunt, I'm afraid I don't trust them at all. Maybe maybe I'm wired cynically, or I like to think it's that I kind of bring some critique to the process. But even the way that questions are asked, you can instantly tell biases, and there's this instant desire to create a story when there shouldn't be one. Just normal kind of flow of focus of life. But for whatever reason, we live in a world with very little trust nowadays. And there are lots of complex reasons for that. I'm going to touch on some of them in the article that I'm writing. But there are things we can do, and there are ways we can behave that actually help to build trust. And so I'm just going to quickly tell you that story, because I use it a lot in the kind of coaching side of things I do. And it's a hormonal one. So stress hormones is identified in 1936, so we've been aware of it for a long time, cortisol. It's not just about negatives. It's impossible to have a life of well-being, a fulfillment, without cortisol in the mix. Because as with all of these things, we often know about the negative influence, testosterone and violence, and we often don't know about the wider, broader situations. But cortisol keeps us engaged. Give you a little burst of it in the morning because I've got to get up and get to work. It gets me focused and so on. But when it kicks off, when it's not so, if you like, crippling that you've just got huge amounts of it going through your system the whole time, which is chronic stress, it's referred to sometimes as eustress, which is good stress. It's what gets me engaged and gets me focused. And when that kicks in, so I'm given a challenge and it kicks in, shortly after it's kicked in, and it's all quite quick, it's within a few minutes of it kicking in, it will trigger within your body a little burst of oxytocin, which, as I said, which is not universal, but in most folks will create a greater hunger or desire to look for a connection with somebody else, for a relational connection. So that kind of bonding hormone between a mother and a child and so on. And so why is that? Well, it makes sense, doesn't it? Because we've got a challenge. It makes sense to see if there's someone that can help me with it. And so I'm more likely, when that little burst of oxytocin kicks in after the stress, a few minutes after the stress hormone is raised because I've got a challenge in front of me, I'm more likely to take a risk in soliciting someone's help. And that show of vulnerability, which is kind of triggered by the mix of cortisol and oxytocin, actually in most people causes a response which creates a little spike of oxytocin in them too, which means that they are more predisposed to actually helping. And in a cynical sense, this is what salespeople know. They get trained, ask the person to help you first and they're more likely to buy something from you. And I'm not advocating that kind of levels of cynicism, but it's about understanding as to how we go about things. And so there's a kind of, if you like, something that's wired into us to look for help and then to get a response of help that comes out of that kind of hormonal situation. And if the task itself, if you like, the focus of the cortisol can be achieved in a relatively short time, normally best in an ideal world before the sun goes down, before you sleep on it, and you're doing it with someone else and you celebrate with them in the right way, and that's always a key thing. You kind of succeed in the task, which is why you had a little burst of the stress hormone. You did it with someone and then you adequately celebrate it with them, and then what happens is, as we sleep, it seems, if you like, the benefits of that positive experience beds down, and the next day you have a connection with that person at a very deep sort of subconscious psychological level. They mean more to you. They start to become more important to you. And that's a kind of a general cycle. And is the foundation of why, if we work with certain people in certain ways and we have good enough relationship and we share the honour and we celebrate each other as we do it, that cycle, of course, is building and building and building. And those very people become massively significant to us. They become the foundation of our core relationships. Now, there's a whole massive host of things I could say about how you maintain that kind of the positive outflow of that, because there are places where it can become a problem, in exclusivity of relationships, excluding others, become too dependent on one person and so on. But just to understand that kind of flow, which is that the ordinary everyday challenges can become an opportunity to build connections and meaning with people that will actually add long-term quality to your life and other people's lives. Famously, Jean-Paul Sartre says, hell is other people. Whereas in the realms of positive psychology, they say, actually, there's no such thing as well-being without other people. In other words, heaven is other people. And this is part of the if you like, part of the key of making the difference, is actually you take the opportunities that the challenges of life give us day by day, we process them well, we celebrate the successes, we make sure that we keep progress towards the accomplishment in small enough bites that we can process it regularly and day by day, if you like, or at the very worst, week by week. They don't just hang over us for months on end, at which point actually see what happens is the oxytocin kick in fails after a while. It only happens at the beginning. So we don't get that great opportunity, if you like, to cement the connection. So a little bit of a mix this morning. We did a little bit of the theological side. Faith is a gift. Because that's really what I was talking about there, is if we understand that process, we can actually, if you like, gift other people with trust in us. We look at the challenges that face us, we invite others in, we do it in a way where we are expressing, if you like, we're taking a risk in bringing somebody new. For that season, that little period, while it's producing in them an opportunity to take a risk with you, if we can actually come to some sort of cycle or circuit and celebrate it, be grateful for it and so on, then actually layer by layer, piece by piece, over long periods of time, we're building and we're gifting trust one to another. So that's probably my final thought. Let's gift trust to each other, and we can get smarter in the way we do it. So I'm just going to pray for the day. Pray you have a good one. If you're at work this morning, which most of us will be, I've got a meeting in about an hour's time. No, just over an hour. So just finish walking the dogs and get there. We can use those opportunities. Use the challenges of work to create those little moments, and where effectively we're gifting the people around us with an ability to trust us. As the bridge of trust grows, actually the possibility to deliver things of more significance over that bridge grows too. So Jesus, just ask that you'd make us wise with the opportunities you give us. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen.